Selamat datang di Festival Etalase Pemikiran Perempuan 2023. Festival ini adalah ruang sirkulasi pemikiran perempuan Nusantara di ranah seni budaya dengan semangat lintas disiplin, kelas, wilayah geografis, budaya, dan generasi. Etalase Pemikiran Perempuan merupakan inisiatif Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan atau SPP yang memasuki edisi daringnya yang keempat. Rantau, Women in Translation. Penulis dan penerjemah sastra dalam 3 bahasa akan hadir dalam panel diskusi yang membahas persoalan penerjemahan sastra ke dalam bahasa lain, di mana faktor-faktor seperti geopolitik dan gender juga mencerminkan ketidakseimbangan dalam sastra dunia. Bagaimana penulis dan penerjemah menciptakan strategi bergerak di dalam struktur patriarkal, kolonial, dan kapitalis yang membentuk ranah sastra lokal dan global. Apakah ada potensi kolaborasi antar puan penulis dan penerjemah melampaui batas-batas budaya dan negara? Metode penulisan dan penerjemahan apa yang dapat ditawarkan? Panel akan berlangsung dalam bahasa Inggris dengan penerjemahan ke dalam bahasa Indonesia di ruang Zoom. Rantau, Women in Translation, menghadirkan panelis Bora Chung, Zulfah Nur Alimah, Mina Kandasami, bersama pemandu Intan Paramadita dan Asri Pratiwi Wulandari. Panduan Etik Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan. Panduan etik ini diterapkan dalam kegiatan-kegiatan Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan atau SPP. Tujuan diadakannya SPP adalah menciptakan ruang belajar dan berbagi yang inklusif, aman, nyaman, dan berani bagi beragam orang yang terlibat di dalamnya, juga bagi lingkungan hidup yang menopang kegiatan SPP. Kami mengajak semua yang terlibat untuk datang dengan keterbukaan dan sikap positif, serta selalu berpartisipasi secara konstruktif selama acara berlangsung. SPP berkomitmen dan berdedikasi untuk menyediakan lingkungan yang terbuka dan bebas dari pelecehan bagi semua orang maupun bagi alam raya. Untuk menjamin itu semua, maka kami tidak akan menerima perilaku-perilaku yang mengandung pemaksaan, pelecehan, dan kekerasan dalam bentuk apapun selama acara berlangsung. Kami akan mengambil tindakan tegas menanggapi pelanggaran-pelanggaran yang terjadi. Tata tertib di ruang acara. Demi kelancaran pelaksanaan Festival Etalase Pemikiran Perempuan, kami mohon kerjasama Anda untuk membaca dan mengikuti beberapa anjuran berikut. Memberi nama akun Zoom dengan nama Anda. Menggunakan aplikasi Zoom versi
Use the latest version of Zoom. Select the language that you want to listen to. Unmute original audio or adjust the sound of the original audio so that you can still follow the conversation. Follow the moderator's direction regarding participating in the discussion and Q&A. Do not circulate the webinar link, ID, and Zoom password. Managers of the Etalase Pemikiran Perempuan 2023. Content Designer
Aulia Nabila Fal, Hayomi Amindoni, Karlin Karmadina, Dewi Rosvalianti Azizah, Eka Putri Puisi, Eka Wahyuni, Fatimah Filzah Izati, Halida Bunga Visandra, Himas Nur, Intan Paramadita, Isfara Dewati, Lisa Bonarahman, Luna Harisma, Margaret Rati Fernandes, Marta Hebi, Naomi Srikandi, Nyainah Raseki, Picita Julinanda, Restiana Purwaningrum, Rifka Diah Safitri, Silvi Cipi, Tiasani Kusumo Dewanti, Udiarti, Yuli Riswati, Zahrotun Nafisah. Pendiri Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan, Andi Yentriani,
founders of the school,
Intan Paramadita, Lisa Bonarahman, Naomi Srikandi, Nyainah Raseki. Kesekretariatan, Hilda Karwayu, Margaret Rati Fernandes. Pengelola publikasi, Dita Kurnia, Rema Wijaya, Zuliani Evi.
Publication managers,
Pengelola arsip, Amalia Skarja.
archivist,
Pengelola ruang pertemuan daring,
manager of the online Zoom meeting,
Tiara Sasmita, Vera Yulia. Komite Kerja Alumni
working committee of the school's alumni,
Penerjemah, Pusat Layanan Juru Bahasa Isyarat,
translators.
Santi. Terima kasih kepada Adai 13, Aditya,
We would like to thank the following:
Ariska Wulandari, Ayu Mita Radila, Balan Tuman, Catherine Bupri, Francisco Eduardo Kamisopa, Hasdian Karisma Priyani, Iwan Nuris, Komunitas KH, Laksamana Abdi Satria, Livestream Pro ID, Muhammad Salman Alfaris, Mukhlis Ucil, Naya Patmaruna Creative Space, Nisa Argarini, Nursalim Yadi Anugrah, Putu Sibau Art Community, Ratri Sinta Pratiwi, Reski Ciki, Rizka Afandi, Suwarni, Women's Fund Asia, dan para donatur Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan.
Hello everyone, selamat siang. Welcome to our panel, Rantau, Women in Translation. This is part of our feminist festival, Etalase Pemikiran Perempuan, or Etalase. This is the 4th year of Etalase, the space to circulate knowledge produced by women and non-binary individuals across the Indonesian archipelago. We focus on arts and culture with a spirit of crossing disciplinary, cultural, geographical, and generational boundaries. Etalase is a program of Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan, or the School of Women's Thought, an initiative that creates an intervention in the processes of knowledge production that have marginalized, invalidated, and erased women, queer people, people with disability, and other minorities. We aim to engage in the act of epistemic disobedience against colonial, capitalist, and patriarchal structures of knowledge by centering the roles of women in the archipelago, in this case, women in the global south, in the processes of knowledge production as valid producers of knowledge. This panel is in English with Bahasa Indonesia and Indonesian Sign Language translation. Please note that the Indonesian language translation is only available on Zoom. Okay, so my name is Intan Paramadita. I am the co-founder and co-organizer of Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan, the School of Women's Thought, the collective that organizes this festival. I'm an Indonesian author, and as someone whose work has been translated into English and a few other languages, I'm very delighted to learn from our speakers today. I'm based in Australia as an academic, and I am at home in Gadigal land or Sydney. So I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So Rantau panel is the only English language panel in our Indonesian language festival. The use of English, the use of Indonesian language is political. We think that we still need to build a body of feminist knowledge that captures the diverse experiences of women and gender minorities across the archipelago in this language. Some forms of language about feminism, such as research, books, articles, etc., are available in English, and often we have difficulties translating certain concepts into Indonesian. That's why it is really important to keep building knowledge in this language. And this may open up further discussion around the choice of language, why we write in a particular language, or why we translate from language to another in this panel. This year's RANTAU focuses on women in translation to welcome the Women in Translation Month in August. We are honored to speak to Bora Chung from Korea, Zulfah Nur Alimah from Indonesia. Zulfah, you are currently based in Egypt. Mina Kandasamy from the UK. We have some technical issues. I'm not sure if Mina is here already, but we'll see. So the three speakers today are authors and translators working with different languages: Korean, Russian, Polish, Indonesian, Arabic, English, and Tamil. So I would like to introduce my co-host today. I am hosting this panel with Ulan, or Asri Pratiwi Wulandari. Asri will introduce the speakers. Asri translates Japanese novels into Indonesian. Among others, she has translated works by Kawakami Mieko, Matsuda Aoko, and Tamura Toshiko. Sometimes she does other types of work in the book industry, such as writing fiction and editing. She is currently enrolled in the master's program in gender studies. Ulan is also an alumna of Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan. So Ulan, the floor is yours to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Kaintan. Hello, everyone. I'm Ulan. I am moderating this panel today from Wajik country, Old Perth. So I begin today by acknowledging the Wajik people, traditional custodians of the lands, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. As someone who started translating just a few years ago, only recently I started to truly understand about how I can learn so much from fellow translators about how to navigate this patriarchal, colonial, and capitalist industry. How can we find mentors or comrades in fellow translators' practices? That's why it's such an honor to be here, to be able to learn from three amazing translators, Zulfah Nur Alimah, Bora Chung, and Mina Kandasamy. I will introduce them first. Zulfah Nur Alimah completed her master's program in Arabic literary criticism at Al-Azhar University, Cairo in 2021. Currently, Zulfah mainly translates from the Egyptian government's radio program, where she has worked since 2015. Zulfah also works as a freelance translator. She has translated several books of the Egyptian Ministry of Waqf, as well as several Arabic literary works. Among the literary works, she has translated Dar al-Adab, or The Night Post, by Hoda Barakat, and Saidat al-Qamar, or Celestial Bodies, by Joka al-Harthi. Bora Chung is a writer of science fiction and generally unrealistic stories. She also translates modern literary works from Russian and Polish into Korean. She has published 4 novels and 5 books of collected short stories in Korean. Among them, Cursed Penny, a collection of short stories, was shortlisted for the 2022 International Booker Prize. And Mina Kandasamy is an activist, poet, novelist, and translator. Her books of poetry include Touch and Miss Militancy, and she is the author of 3 acclaimed novels, Gypsy Goddess, When I Hit You, and Exquisite Cadavers. In 2022, she was elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and was also awarded the Penn-Herman Keston Prize for her writing and work as a fearless fighter for democracy, human rights, and the free word. Her latest published work is The Book of Desire, a translation of the love poetry of Tirukkural. I'm pretty sure our audience is as excited as I am to hear your stories and ideas on translation. The first discussion will be led by Kaintan. Back to you, Kaintan.
Thank you, Ulan. All right, so I guess we're still waiting for Mina. We have some technical issues here, so apologies, but I will begin with the first question. So as you can tell from the bios of our speakers, what's unique about them is that they are writers and translators. Mina Kandasamy writes poetry and fiction in addition to her work of translation, and Bora Chung writes short stories, and Zulfah writes essay. So the first question is how to navigate both worlds, writing and translation. Does the practice of translation inform your writing? Are your writing style, preferences, and political ideas influence the text that you pick to translate? Shall we start with Bora maybe, and then we'll continue with Zulfah?
Hi, thank you for having me. And as a translator, I would like to thank the interpreter and the sign language interpreter. Both are translators, helping us do this, organize this whole thing. So thank you. And how I choose, I studied Russian and Polish literatures, so my standard is non-commercial. I basically try to introduce works that are really fun, really good, but not known in Korea. And I don't care if it sells or not. Most of the times they don't sell, which is sad. Sorry, that's about it.
Okay. So, but if I may ask a follow-up question, how do you navigate both worlds? Like, how do you you have to deal with different politics, I would say, in the field.
How do you mean by politics?
I mean, in the literary field, as a writer, you have to deal with, you know, sometimes the invisibility of your writing, for instance. Well, now it's highly visible, but there were times, I'm sure, in a writer's life where it seems that it's not really easy to be due to the gatekeepers and so on. And then maybe you also need to deal with that in the translation field. So is it difficult to be both a translator and a writer?
Translating helped me write. I can't really say the other way around. Translating helps me as a writer, but me being a writer probably doesn't help me as a translator. And as for gatekeeping, I have been a no-name writer and no-name translator for all my life. And all of this Booker International thing and Karsbani and everything came in 2022 as a surprise. So I never had any support for my translation. I just assumed that the books would not sell. And I've been constantly amazed that publishers kept asking me to translate things. But these are really, really good works. The works that I translate, my translation may not be as good as the original text, but I can guarantee you that the original text is at top of the list. So, and they were not introduced to Korea due to Cold War, mainly because South Korea has North Korea, and everything from the communist bloc was completely banned during the entire Cold War. So basically, Koreans don't know about Russia after Tolstoy, and Koreans don't really know about Poland at all. So there's this rich gold mine that I can keep digging and keep discovering. Selling is a completely different problem, but I was lucky enough to have a job as a Russian teacher. So being a translator was not my full-time job. So I had the freedom to choose the works that I saw as the best of the best that needed to be translated because we are a civilized country and we should have this work translated into Korean from an artistic point of view. And I realized more and more that it was a luxury, it was a privilege that I had that most translators don't have. And now Korea is getting more interested in Polish literatures and former Eastern Bloc culture. So there are more doors opening for me.
Thank you so much, Bora. There's a lot to talk about further, just based on what you said about the lack of support and what gets translated and what not, depending on the politics and what you choose to translate. You choose to translate books that are fun, books that are good, and they're not always appealing commercially. So we will explore more of these things. I will move to Zulfah. So Zulfah, you are an essay writer and a translator. How do you navigate both worlds, writing and translating from Arabic to Indonesian?
Oke. Pertama-tama selamat siang untuk semua. Salam kenal. Suatu kehormatan buat saya untuk bisa berada satu forum bersama Mbak Intan Paramadita, bersama Mbak Asri Pratiwi, bersama Bora Chung, dan juga bersama Mena Kandasami. Terima kasih karena saya diberi kesempatan untuk bisa berbagi sedikit hal yang saya tahu terkait penerjemahan sastra Arab ke dalam bahasa Indonesia. Terkait pertanyaan Mbak Intan tadi, sebenarnya sama juga yang dikatakan oleh Bora Chung bahwa dunia penerjemahan, dunia kepenulisan, ditambah dengan dunia membaca, itu sangat dekat dan saling berkelit-kelindan. Jadi kita tidak bisa menerjemah kalau kita tidak bisa menulis, dan kita tidak bisa menulis kalau kita tidak bisa membaca. Karenanya dalam buku-buku tentang seni penerjemahan yang saya baca, seperti halnya buku Fannu Terjemah karya Muhammad Anani, ataupun buku Seni Penerjemahan yang ditulis oleh Mas Anton Kurnia, selalu mengatakan bahwa penerjemah yang baik adalah penulis yang baik pula. Jadi sini mungkin saya tidak berlebihan ketika mengatakan bahwa menerjemah adalah manifesto dari membaca dan menulis. Untuk saya pribadi, menerjemah saya jadikan sebagai cara pintas untuk belajar membaca dan menulis secara bersamaan. Karena dengan menerjemah, saya dipaksa untuk menguji ulang pemahaman saya terhadap apa yang saya pahami. Misalnya, sederhana sekali, terakhir saya menerjemahkan buku kisah untuk anak-anak. Ada orang tua mengatakan barakallahu fik kepada anaknya yang rajin di sekolah. Secara literal, kata barakallahu fik itu artinya adalah semoga Allah memberkahimu. Tapi kalau saya terjemahkan secara polos begitu saja, maka kita rasa makna yang ingin disampaikan itu tidak tersampaikan. Makanya saya harus menggali konteks makna dan akhirnya saya menemukan makna yang tepat untuk kata barakallahu fik adalah
I have to find the other word. So translating it helps me to be more sensitive to the world of to the nuances. I translated from Arabic because I want to learn how to write well. Because by translating novels, I learned how the novelists, say for example, how the novelists create characters and develop the logic of the stories, and also create or develop perspectives. And about my preference about the translated works, because I personally like literature, and academically I deal with the literary criticism. I have this preference to translate Arabic text into Indonesian, although I'm open to also translate books on religion, but that's just as a side job, because I have my main purpose is how to introduce more Arabic works into Indonesian or to the Indonesian people, because the ones who are interested in translating works on religion, we have a lot of them, but those who have this willingness or interest in translating works of uh, literary works is not a lot.
Yeah, so I think I learned something today. I don't really translate, but it's really good to hear that translation is a way to learn how to read and how to write. And I would like to follow up on what you were saying about translating Arabic literature into Indonesian. So this is related to my question about gender politics in the field of literary translation. But maybe you could tell us about the context of translating Arabic literature. I mean, you mentioned that most translators would prefer translating religious or religious themed books, and you mentioned as well that in the case of translation of Arabic literature into Indonesian, the situation is quite sad, despite Indonesia's status as a country with the largest Muslim population. So why is this sad? And how about this the position of women writers writing in Arabic? Do we read a lot of Arabic writings by women?
Oke, terima kasih Mbak Intan atas pertanyaannya. Kalau kita berbicara mengenai penerjemahan.
Thank you very much for the question. If you talk about the translation of Arabic words into Indonesian, we will see that most of the literary works, Arabic literary works, would be works from the writers at the end of the 19th or 20th century. Khalil Gibran, for example, and we have Ethan Abdul Qudus and Najib Mahmoud. And we also have novels in 2008, Arabic novels, Al Jazil. This is translated by my senior, so I know the translation. However, the literary world has this dynamics just as in other countries. So Arabic poetry does not end at Mahmoud Darwish, and just as the literary work does not end in Najib Mahmoud, there are always writers that are newly emerged. And if we look at the translation of Arabic works written by the women and has been translated outside of the world, it's very rare. We have Roja Ashodi with her book, The Cause of Riyadh, and also all my friends, when I ask them, do you know this Arabic novel written by a female Arabic that has been translated into Indonesian? They will answer this. This is the Woman in Point Zero by, and we can debate about the aesthetic value of this work, but we can't deny that this novel has this place as a document that can reveal all of these layers, and where the woman is always a person who have lost or defeated. And the translation of Arabic work into Indonesian is quite sad, as you've mentioned, Intan, because in general, the translation of Arabic works into Indonesian is actually quite massive. We have this emotional closeness that makes the religious students to translate works of Arabic documents. We have all the religious students will know about Yusuf Wardawi translation of his works that would be freely massively available at the bookshops. And because I live in Egypt and I also work with several religious institutions in Egypt, I know very well how the religious institutions such as Al Azhar and the ministry, that is Ministry of Religion, still wants to still translate works of their academic world into other languages, into Indonesian. But how can the literary translation is just so rare? And the fast answer to this is perhaps literary work is considered not so important in our daily lives. Literary works is considered as just lullaby or just a way to spend your free time.
Okay. Terima kasih. Thank you. Okay, it's a bit hard for me to navigate between two languages. Thank you, Zulfah. It's really interesting how in Indonesia there's this interest in translating from Arabic, but mostly they are religious themed books. And then in terms of literature, it's kind of stuck in the 20th century. I agree with you. And I really hope that there are more women contemporary 21st century women writers being translated. Now, I can think of Adania Shibli, who is also our friend, the friend of Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan. Her work is very exciting, giving us insights into Palestinian politics and culture. So I hope that there will be more contemporary women writers being translated. Now let's still around gender politics in literary translation. I will move to Bora. Bora, you can also talk about this in terms of how you see the translation field in Korea, but also I think a lot of us here would like to know your work as a woman writer being translated. We know that your work raises questions around gender, class, capitalism in Korean society, very political. Do you think that the translation of your work in the global literary scene allows more exposure of your feminist concerns? Go ahead, Bora.
I have the honor of meeting more and more people since my works began to get translated. But as a writer, what I feel is that I gained a lot of colleagues, I gained a lot of friends who are in the same field as me. And I'm a translator, so I love my translators. And a lot of them are women. I came to see that in most of the world, the cultural field is created and supported and run by women. My translator in Indonesian is a lady. She's a woman. My translator into Colombian Spanish is a woman, and my translator into Polish is a woman, and the Polish bunny, this one, is being published from a publisher that is run by women only. And they didn't plan to be women only, but the cultural field just formed that way. All the men went to finances where big money is, and cultural field pays less, and it feels less political, I suppose, especially when we're dealing with fiction. It's a bunch of imaginary stories, so I guess it seems softer and more feminine and women-like. So women, we rule culture. And I gained a lot of colleagues in this field. And it's sad that women are left in the cultural field basically because the field doesn't make as much money as finances or political field. But we have that much power, I think. And translators are the are the supporters, and they are the creators and the rulers of languages, several different languages. And now the vast majority of those who are translating and interpreting are women. So I think our feminist power is bigger than ever in the translating field. And I think women need to have more recognition. In some countries where cultural, the financial value of culture is being recognized, in those countries, women translators, women publishers are gaining a little more recognition, but translators in general are not being recognized, regardless of gender. It's just translators seem to be this machine that just magically changes one language to another, and then they are ignored, which is not true. And I think as workers of and bridges of two cultures or more cultures, I think translators and interpreters need more recognition. That would be my next agenda if I have an agenda.
Thank you, Bora. Yeah, that leads me to the next question, because you mentioned about women actually rule the cultural field, but at the same time, translators, or especially women translators, are not being fully appreciated. Now we will move on to the last question for me, and because I don't think we have Mina here, I would like to invite Ulan if she has any thoughts. I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts. I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but please feel free to join the conversation, because after this third question, Ulan will also take over and sharing her own experiences as a translator. So the third question is about whether we writers and translators can create strategies to navigate the structures, the patriarchal, colonial, and capitalist structures that shape the literary scene locally and globally. You know, whether transnational connection is possible. Are there any potentials in collaborations between women writers, women translators across cultural and national borders? Bora, you already mentioned a bit about how you get connected to other women writers, women translators, but perhaps you can add more to that.
So I am participating in a German anthology of feminist writers. So it's 10 stories by 10 women writers. And my story is obviously written in Korean, so a German translator is working on it. And I have another proposal from Canada, and they suggested a similar theme. 5 Canadian feminist or LGBTQI or minority writers, and 5 of the Korean writers who are also somehow minority. And we're doing some kind of exchange. And so those things are happening, and my agency happens to be all women too. So I told you, cultural field and women. Um, so my agent is quite interested in those things. So and she knows that I am interested too. So I am finding out this world of collaboration through a network of very hardworking, very intelligent women. But as far as I can see, it's just Germany and Canada and maybe Poland, because I studied Polish and I've been to Poland. So it's not Indonesia, it's not Thailand, it's not Vietnam, it's not Malaysia. I know that this lady from Malaysia is working on Kersbani to translate it into Malaysian, Bahasa Melayu, because she believes that although a lot of Malaysians can read Kersbani in English, there has to be a Bahasa Melayu version, because it is a respectable language. And if this is a good enough work, is it? I'm not sure about my work, but Bahasa Melayu is a good language, and they need to have their own version, not just the English version. And that is her own way of fighting linguistic colonialism. And I respect that. Um, so I think I would personally like to find more of Asian collaboration. The feminist writing, creative collaboration are coming from the West, which is good. Any collaboration with female authors is good, but I would like to find more about the Asian connection.
Thank you so much, Bora. Yeah, I agree with you. I've just read and written an introduction to the Indonesian edition of Mariana Enriquez, The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, and it's superb. It's just a different experience reading it in Indonesian. And I agree that we need to build this trans-Asian writers, translators network. Let's do it. Okay, let's go to Zulfah. Zulfah, what do you think about possible intervention, possible collaborations across cultures and national borders? I think you're still on mute, Zulfah.
Oh, maaf.
Sorry. Okay. In 2022, I have been given the opportunity by Rani Agustinus to translate a short story, an Arabic short story. And this is a writer from Syria in a collection of Lumbung stories or barn stories. This is a collection of stories, and the majority of the writers are women from the Latin America, Arabic, and in the majority of this is translated by females. So it means that female writers and translators working across cultures, across boundaries, can have this collaboration. And in terms of Arabic novels, I translate at the moment. I translate. Oh, sorry, you can hear the call of prayer, right? Shall we continue, or what should we do? Because I'm in a meeting room.
Okay, so that's a very interesting soundscape for our translation panel. I guess you can continue after the Azan, Zulfa, in terms of the collaboration that you mentioned, bringing the global South writers and translators. But maybe Ulan, you have something to add, and I guess I will, after this, you can take over.
Okay. First, I want to respond to what Bora said. Most of my translator friends in Indonesia are also women, and as a translator, I do love my translators and I do love my women. As for the answer to the question, as a translator who translates to Japanese, from Japanese to Indonesian, sadly, I don't. I find it difficult to imagine having a collaboration with authors from Japan, because from what I hear from the publishers, it can be quite difficult to communicate directly with the authors, because it's always managed by agents or publishers. And so the decisions about collaborations are situated within the logic of capitalist industry. So there's no collaboration. It's more like a marketing campaign. And from what I heard, it seems like Japanese publishers don't treat Indonesian publishers well, because Indonesian literary scene is not seen as the main stage. It is not considered a notable achievement to be translated to Indonesian and to be read by Indonesian readers. And that is why after becoming a translator, I have this like an extreme an anger towards English even when I'm speaking it. And that's why at the moment I've only experienced how amazing it is to collaborate, or no, to be friends with fellow translators from here in Indonesia. I got really inspired recently by fellow translator friends, Gitananda and Irman from Labyrinth Book Labyrinth. They showed me that by starting their own publisher, they can have more agency as a worker in the Indonesian book industry. They can have more liberty in choosing the titles and put the time and work needed to translate the books. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ulan. I guess now you can take over.
I'm very interested in what Zulfah and Bora said before, how you have so much love and care towards the literature you translated, even though it didn't sell, even though you feel like it might not sell, or and if it really didn't, you still understand how important the words are, and you really know how important it is for the works to be read, because it has great voices and messages. But with it's so much expectation from the industry itself and from you working as a translator. But even if you do it with love, even though you do it with so much care work, it's still, we have to still think about translation as a work. And so I would like to ask you, how do we make sure that our labors get the appreciation we need to make translation a sustainable work, instead of a vocation someone has to afford? Like, with so much expectations that are given to you, how do aspiring translators break through the industry right now? And like, does the industry invest on their individuals, for example, in the form of translation grants or fully funded workshops? Maybe we can start from Zulfah.
Oke, saya minta maaf.
I'm sorry for the interference. So I would also like to add, before I answer as this question, I would also like to add that I have translated several Arabic fiction. Among those there are 2 novels and 1 short story that translated by female. Kode Barokat, I've mentioned that. So Night Letters, and we also have the novel of Saidatul Qomat, or Women of the Moon. And now we have a short story titled Green Grass. So the more I read these stories, and as I translate them, I fall more love. And I thought that, oh, actually, these female Arabic writers, they don't only they're not only able to present the complexity of humans, they don't only talk about women and the injustice. The works are able to go beyond gender boundaries so that their works can actually touch humans' lives in a more expansive context. And I believe that these kind of works, it is these kind of works that we have to introduce more. So the women, their works are popular not because they talk about their marginalized life. No, they don't only talk about their rights. They don't only talk about the injustice that have befallen them, but they can also be a bridge. And I think this is very extraordinary. When I translated these three works, I feel that these Arabic women have the competency, have the capacity that is on a par with the males to also create nuances in the Arabic works. What is missing here is that they are not well known. I can say this because I can do a simple comparison. Say, if you look at the list of names that have received International Prize for Arabic Fiction awards, this is a very prestigious awards for Arabic writers. This has been going on since 2008, and 16 years have gone, and only two female women have received the awards. The first is, and the second was to Huda Barokat. So we have a lot of homework. So for me personally, I have this task, I have this homework to introduce more female Arabic writers to Indonesia, to the Indonesian public, because also in relation to Astrid's question, I got into the world of translation just in 2021. Only in 2021 I decided to be courageous enough to translate Arabic works, because previously I felt, oh, can I do it? So I think as I become an Arabic translator, I have been supported by publishers that are focusing on translating Arabic works. And hopefully you can still hear me clearly. So I have been supported and helped by publishers who are concerned in translating works. So I am very thankful that because there are these publishers who are willing to appreciate this kind of translation work, and perhaps to to help us in translation. Perhaps you can make projects. Perhaps Sekolah Pemikiran Perempuan also has this project to translate works of female writers into Indonesian. So this is what I have in mind at the moment.
Can you share your opinion about it, Bora?
I thought I talked too much. So Korean, my experience as a translator is has always been tied to my experience at universities, because I started translating as a student, and later I started teaching at a university, and that helped me a lot. And in Korea, there are graduate programs for translation and interpretation. And this helps a lot of female interpreters and translators, because they belong to this institution. And Korea is traditionally a very Confucius country, and Confucianism respects education and knowledge. So if a person belongs to a university, and if a professor can say, this person is a good translator, or this person graduated from our program, then that person has that more respectability, that more clout. So that's how I got into translation. And I know that a lot of my colleagues who were teaching at universities, they started translating as this and that teacher from this and that university. And that is kind of the introduction for the translator that vouches for the literary value of the book. So they're not getting real support from universities. They just have that fame of the university behind them. It's not real support. And there are no real workshops outside the graduate programs. So I have no idea how a person becomes a translator in Korea. Uh, and this is a problem, because if a person doesn't have the money and a few years of freedom to go to graduate school and do all the work, then the person will not have a chance. And there used to be an exam by the Korean Translators Association. And I hope that that exam and the association would give translation some level of credibility and some level of specialty. But that, well, then graduate school programs emerged, and Koreans trust universities more than this association of actual translators. So that exam kind of fell flat. So university and also the school system, and this is very colonial and very racist. Korean publishers sell a lot of their books to school and to parents of school children, because the Ministry of Education or the school system makes a list of must-read books. You have to read these books while you're in high school. You have to read this and that book while you are in middle school, which is a good thing, which is normal. But a lot of those books, a lot of the books on the world literature list are from white European men. And publishing companies live on these lists. That's their staple. That's their staple stream of revenue. So publishers are trying to find new books that they can add to the list of world literature, because they can't sell Tolstoy forever, and they still prefer white European men. And I happen to translate from Russian and Polish and they are predominantly white European countries. So I come from a university background, so I entered the translation field quite easily because I kind of used this colonial racist prejudice to my advantage. But if there is a very good translator of Bahasa Indonesia or Bahasa Malayu in Korea, then she will not get a job. She will not make a living as a translator because this entire Korean society is racist. And that is something I, as an Asian woman, need to fight. But unfortunately, I don't speak Bahasa Indonesia. I'm so sorry. So I'll have to find another way.
Okay, thank you, Zulfah and Bora. I think I will read some of the questions by the audience. I saw that you have answered some of the questions, Bora, and so I'll just read the ones that haven't been answered. Maybe first I'll read the question to Zulfah. It's in Indonesian. Bagaimana cara menerjemahkan frase dalam bahasa Arab?
How do you translate phrases from Arabic into Indonesian, especially if we don't have similarities in
Indonesian, especially when there is no direct translation in Indonesian?
Terima kasih jawabannya. Sebenarnya ini jawaban umum ya. Maksudnya,
Well, thank you very much for the question. It is a general answer. I think every translator will have this problem, this issue. There will be challenges in finding translation, direct translation in doing the work. There is no standard rule in translation. My personal experience is when I translate and I can't find any direct translation. For example, I translated a novel by Gosan Kanavani. The title is The Other Thing That Killed Laila Al-Khalid. And this writer uses a lot of phrases. So they use a lot of proverbs. So I can't translate immediately. So I use the meaning of the proverbs because I want the readers to be able to read the translation just as they read Indonesian books. So they don't feel that, oh, this is a translation work. So how do I go about this when I have phrases or that I can't find direct translation for? Then I translate using the meaning that is immediately related. So barakallahu, for example, that is that is a very easy word because everyone who understands who finds who understands Arabic will say that barakallahu. But especially in the context of Indonesian, if we say, oh, God bless you, when this is a parent saying to the children, it is not exactly correct. So my rule of thumb is how to make sure that the phrases go smoothly in the languages that we are translating into. I think, Asri, you have similar experience as a translator in Japanese, and also Bora Chung, who also have these challenges. I'm sure you have had this experience of trying to find direct translation.
You have the similar experience in translating a certain word to Korean.
I didn't hear the first part of the question.
Or
But
do you also find similar challenges in translating from Polish or Russian to Korean, where I think some words cannot be directly translated, and sometimes a word can have multiple translations in the target languages. How do you deal with that as a translator?
I think that's a universal problem for any translator of any language. And my approach is a little bit different because I used to be a researcher of Russian and Polish literature, and that was my first job. So I used footnotes. I try to translate as smoothly as possible, and then if that doesn't work, then or if there are historical names or historical events in Polish literature, especially, there's a lot because Poland was the victim of the Second World War, as was many Asian countries. But and the context was very different from Korean history. So I use footnotes, and my editors hate it. My publishers hate it. They think footnotes are ugly and they don't read easily. So yeah. Um, yeah, I agree with them. Footnotes are ugly. That's the best I could do.
I really like both of your answers, how Zulfah thinks that when translating to Indonesian, she wants to you want to make it feel like someone is not reading a translated work, and how Bora chooses different practice in which well, if it makes the context expressed to the readers, then who cares if it's a little bit difficult, right? We can use Google, we don't have to cater to laziness in reading. But at the same time, it's that answer is not always right. Sometimes we also like it to be light, to have no footnotes. Like both answers can be correct in translation. It's just like a matter of who do we betray and who do we who do we cater. Okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna read some other questions. This is from Naifa to Bora. I want the question is, I want to ask Kak Bora. Kak is a non-gendered way to address someone in Indonesia. I don't know when it starts, but some Korean books were translated to Bahasa Indonesia because some K-idols read that book. Do you think it also helps Korean books to be more promoted outside Korea, especially here in Indonesia? Yes, it's true. Even there are some book clubs that are based on members who like K-pop, and I like it. Do you think, Bora?
Sorry. Literature is supposed to make you happy. Art is supposed to make life more pleasurable or beautiful. So if it makes you happy, then yes. And if it makes you like Korean literature, then yes, thank you.
Another question is for Zulfa. Adakah rekomendasi situs yang memuat karya-karya sastra?
Do you have any recommendation about sites, about the works of female writers, female Arabic writers that have been translated into Indonesian?
About women literature from Arabic that are translated to Indonesian, because most of the ones I found are in English. Sorry, Zulfah, you're still muted.
I'm sorry. Oke. Saya sendiri sebelum
I myself, before I take part in this event, I also search on the internet trying to find novels that have been translated into Indonesian, female Arabic writers that have been translated into Indonesian. I could not find any. And so far, I don't know if there is such websites that would provide a list or recommendations of novels or works translated or written by female Arabic writers that have been translated into Indonesian, because it is very rare that we have female Arabic works translated into Indonesian. I've received a lot of direct messages from Instagram saying, "Oh, when will we get this work published?" Because they are also trying to find novels written by female Arabic writers that would be translated into Indonesian. So this makes me want to have more Arabic translators that would introduce works of female Arabic writers into Indonesian, because a lot of students that take Arabic literature study and they need translation of works of Arabic literature into Indonesian.
Zulfah, it's also in Indonesian. Seperti yang diutarakan Kak Zulfah.
As you've mentioned, Zulfah, that Arabic works have been translated into Indonesian, and a lot of readers want to read this. So in general, by Arabic researchers or researchers in Arabic, and they still mostly are from the 19th century, 20th century, from for example, by Nawal Asadawi, I Forget I Am Women, and works by Najib Kilani that talks about the gender disparity with the gender issues in that time or even previously. Is there any works of Arabic writers, whether female or male, from Arabic contemporary work that talks about the works of contemporary that talks about contemporary issues?
From male or female authors that are talking about contemporary issues or even digital era issues.
Oke, terima kasih untuk pertanyaannya.
Thank you very much for the question. Novels, of course, we have a lot of novels that talk about these issues. Some of this is a novel that I translated, Shadatul Kumar, which hopefully will be published in August. So this novel actually talks about the shifts in perceptions from the conservative society into a modern society, and it looks at that there is this female character with an ambition to get an equal access as with males. And there's also a novel that talks about contemporary issues, and this is one of the novelists that are quite popular and many with many interest in Indonesia.
Kalau untuk
In terms of, can you hear me?
Yes, you may continue, Zulfah.
Oke, untuk menulis laki-laki juga banyak.
For
Misalnya,
male writers, we have quite a lot too. And they're not only talk about women, but they talk about women, but not directly. So I like a novel by Soit Sanusi. In the novel, they talk about strong female characters, and I think this is one way that present women that are not always victims.
Sorry, I found an interesting question, but somehow I can't find it right now. So I'm just gonna read the ones that I can find. Okay. Hi, Bora. Is cultural field being dominated by women affected how Koreans perceive the cultural field in any ways? Do you face any difficulties being women and being women who works in cultural field?
I was actually trying to type the
Saya
answer.
sebetulnya sedang berusaha menulis jawabannya.
So in Korea, there is a very big division between real serious literature and popular literature. And I write science fiction and horror stories, so I belong to the not real, not serious literature. That doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. It's just what you write. But in the field of real, serious, pure literature, the most famous critics and professors of Korean literature are men. So pure literature, real literature, serious literature is dominated by men. And I've heard from different people, from different women, that for a Korean woman to break into that field of real serious Korean literature and be recognized as a writer, she has to write about motherhood. That's the only way. So as a result, we have more talented women in the popular literature field, science fiction, horror, romance, thriller, detective stories, those kind of things, because that field, the entire field, has no respect. That field is not considered serious. No critic, no professor wants to study the field. So women or men or I don't know, alien, non-Korean, whoever wants to write something, they can write whatever they write. And if it's fun, it's gonna sell. So we have more freedom in that field. But and there are million sellers in that field. People don't read, Koreans don't read books. And in this age of Netflix and YouTube, we still have bestsellers in science fiction and horror and thrillers because we have good writers, and a lot of them are women. And they sell well and they are famous and readers love them, and nobody studies them. Korean literature professors don't study them. They are not considered part of the Korean literary tradition. So this is a problem, and this is neglectful, and this is this is a big prejudice on the part of the Korean professors and the academic people who are supposed to study Korean literature. So I was never considered a real writer, not because I'm a woman, but because I write horror stories. And I was never interested in Korean literature, so I didn't care. But not everybody can have that luxury. And the main field, the mainstream literary critical sphere, that area is still dominated by men.
Yeah, thank you for all of the questions and the answers. Now the discussion will be led by Kak Intan again.
Thank you so much, Ulan, for really keeping the time and choosing very interesting questions. Unfortunately, we're not able to answer all questions. We've got so many. Thank you for your enthusiasm. So I guess for the last round of this discussion, what I'm going to do is to do a mini recap, and I would ask you to maybe say a few closing words from Bora and Zulfah, and also you, Ulan. So I will start. I'm not going to say much. Maybe I'll just summarize from what I think is important, the takeaways from this forum. I guess the first one is about the exclusion of women and I guess gender minorities as well. I think we've touched upon that. Bora talks about how what's considered the canon in terms of what students read in Korea is still very much based on this, a range of texts by white European men, and also in Korean literature as well. Women are considered often works by women are not considered important. They're not being discussed as serious literary works. And also, I guess Zulfah also mentioned how women writers writing in Arabic they are excluded, sort of ignored from the list of prizes. You mentioned about this prize for Arabic fiction that basically it's a list of male writing. So we still have issues in this area, and obviously this connects to the problem of who gets translated. And I think one important thing that you also raised, Ulan, is about support, financial support and labor. And I think from all of you, we've got this idea that translation is a labor of love, and therefore the financial compensation is not really thought of, and that's an important area we need to think about. The last one is about collaboration. Some examples of collaboration, the Global South kind of collaboration was mentioned by Zulfah, even though I think it's still growing. And Bora also mentioned that collaborations do exist, but we still need more trans-Asian connections. And I forgot this one back then when I started the panel, but it occurred to me that we do have this good initiative, the Trans-Asian Initiative of Translators. Seems I'm not sure if I pronounce it correctly, but these are translators who translate from Southeast Asian languages into English. So there's Tiffany Zhao there. She mentioned this initiative, Jeremy Tiang, Mui, Pupok Sakul, and others. They have this connection, and they also have this Southeast Asia Asian translator mentorship. If anyone is interested in applying, that's September 30th, 2023. So that's a little bit of advertisement for this initiative, but we need to promote more collaborations and initiatives. But yeah, a few words from each of you. Maybe we can start with Bora and then Zulfah and finally Ulan. Yes, go ahead, Bora.
Yeah, really. Oh, there was one more question about taboos in Korean literary field. Confucianism is not that much of it's not that much of a criteria now, but anything that has strong feminist strong feminist topics or strong feminist arguments can be not welcome in Korean literary publishing field, which is bad. And And also books about communism. I had more problem with this because I studied the 1920s and 1930s Soviet literature. So yeah, I was kind of scared that I might get arrested, but I have not. So yeah, so I think I think we need more feminism in Asia, and we should work more closely. Um, I don't translate into or from a Southeast Asian language, so I'm not sure how I can figure into the network of translators, but please sign me up. I'm here. Thank you. I love you.
Thank you so much. How about you, Zulfah?
Kalau menurut saya,
I think translators and writers have to work harder to introduce works by female writers, so we know the perspective of women, how they recognize themselves and also how they recognize things around her. And again, when we fight for women, we don't have to introduce works that directly talks about this injustice to women. When we introduce works of female writers, as I've mentioned before, when they're able to touch on works of humanity, it shows that women are on a par with men. That can be a bridge and a voice for the disempowered, and whether this is male or female. And literature, I think, is a right place to voice this, because
yang berusaha untuk mendemonstrasi
whether this is art for art's sake that tries to popularize subjective value in literary works, the literary works still can't ignore the social burden that it has, because literary work cannot disengage from their environment. So Adonis says, I forgot in which book, but Adonis says that to Arabic poets, you have to talk about Palestine, because Palestine is like the air that you breathe on a daily basis. It is the reality that you can't deny. So in principle, literature work cannot disengage itself from the reality. And when we read literary works, we will find out about the realities surrounding it. Thank you.
Thank you, Zulfah. And finally, Ulan.
I probably just want to share about how I recently really truly realized how strengthening feminist voices in literary work takes more than translating the text. You need to be able to find the right friends, the right allies to collaborate, to learn from them what practices are possible in your industry. And you can't do it alone, because if you're doing it alone, it probably reach much less people. And I want to collaborate more with more people, more translators, more people in the industry, and so that we can talk about how to make it better for us, make it more comfortable for us translators and writers in this industry, and probably make our own kind of environment. That's all.
Thank you, Ulan. I agree with you. Yeah, it's really about finding the right allies. Hopefully, this panel allows us to do that, to think further about allies in promoting voices of women and non-binary people. So yeah, that's the end of our session. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, Kak Zulfah, Bora, and also Ulan. I hope I didn't throw you under the bus, but it's lovely to hear from you as a writer and translator. And thank you everyone for joining us today. For Indonesian viewers, we still have some panels, Dunia Dalam Berita, or the world in news, feminist news, obviously, and konser ceramah, or lecture concert. So stay tuned. The festival is still on. I hope you are all well, and thank you again for being here. Bye.